The hype when it comes to weight loss drugs has collapsed, at least when it comes to the stock price. Everyone was buying to Novo Nordisk a year ago when the stock shot up over 300%. But now it's back down to $62, basically the same in 21. The stock is now trading at a 19 PE, while revenue is still fastly growing. Last quarter they still grew 30%. And those are kinds of situations I like. The weight loss segment is exploding, and it is very profitable. Why? It is not as regulated as stuff like insulin. They have been on the market for many years. When it comes to health insurance companies, etc., who cover these drugs, they negotiated with Novo Nordisk. The governments behind public insurances also negotiated with them to lower prices. But these obesity care products are so new that they still massively make money. But one thing that is important to know, under diabetes is also Ozempic, because technically Ozempic is for diabetes, Wegovy is for weight loss. However, even with the big rollout of Wegovy and Ozempic, they still expect to grow around 20%. There would be a big slowdown to before, yes, but the stock is only trading at a 19 PE, and a 19 PE company growing at a 20% is great, especially if profits grow faster. The main growing product is those weight loss drugs, which have not come down in price yet. However, that is a bit of a risk for the long term that we'll have to factor in. However, Novo Nordisk still has pent up demand. There was not enough supply. Because it was in such a shortage, other companies were allowed to copy it. For example, him and hers made a lot of money off their drug. And the FDA now stopped that shortage, so they're not allowed to do that anymore. So they have at least some more runway to go here. They also increased production capabilities. You can see that in their net cash, they went into a lot of debt, 11 billion in US dollars. Why? Novo Holdings, the company that basically controls Novo Nordisk, bought Catalent Inc. And after they bought Catalent Inc., Novo Nordisk bought for 11 billion 3 major supply areas: Italy, Belgium, and the US. Especially important is that they're expanding their manufacturing in the US. Because Trump wants to bring pharmaceuticals back home, this will play into their cards. They can say, hey, we produce for the US in the US. Meanwhile, they're also expanding the European market though. When we come to Novo Nordisk Foundation, while they only own 28% of the company, they own the complete control. So basically they can dictate everything. That is something you have to live with. There will always be a little bit of a discount because of that. Now we see, okay, supply has been re-established for Ozempic. They have some roomway to grow. What is the next step here though? The pill. They need to get the pill for Ozempic, because a lot of people still don't take Ozempic because it's in an injection form. Honestly, I would probably take Ozempic if it was a bit cheaper, and if it was in a pill form, because I just honestly hate syringes. I don't want to inject myself every day. And they're trying to get that obesity pill through. Now that will take a bit before it hits the market, but it is in the making. That will once again lead to more revenue growth here. And their pipeline looks very promising. And also not only for obesity and diabetes, also in rare disease and cardiovascular. And it's very spaced out. A lot in phase 1, phase 2, and a lot in the important phase 3. So their pipeline is very filled. They don't have to do a lot of acquisitions like Pfizer had to do to buy the pipeline. What Pfizer had to do, I made a video about them, they had to spend a huge chunk of money to acquire a pipeline because they didn't have one on their own. And a lot of our old drugs are going out of patent. Novo Nordisk doesn't need to do that. The acquisition they had to do was because they didn't have enough production capacity. That is what you dream of as a company. But you can't produce enough for the market. So their pipeline is filled, their revenue is still growing, and I don't really see a risk for the company. The only risk is that Ozempic prices will have to be cut when it gets negotiated with health insurance providers, etc. But overall, I think that is laughable for this stock to trade at a 19 PE. Now, cash flow is not really representative of what the company can bring right now, because they're still investing so much in manufacturing. Like, look at this capital bump. So this is one of the companies I would go with earnings per share with, and they're currently sitting at 22 Danish kroner, which is around $3.3. They pay around half of that out as a dividend. Something important about the dividend here, there is a bit of an issue with it because Denmark has a 27% withholding tax. If your country has a tax treaty with Denmark, you can get some of it back. This is a very time-consuming thing though, so I will not do it. So I would normally pay 25% tax on dividends coming into my portfolio, but because the Danish withholding tax kinda gets applied to me, I pay in total 40%. So that is something you gotta factor in if you're not willing to get that dividend manually back. But let's look at it, why I like Novo Nordisk, what my price is. I'm gonna assume for the next 5 years, they're gonna grow at around 20%. Yes, Ozempic is gonna slow down slightly, but once they get the pill form out, that's gonna give them a huge boost again. Plus now that they get production set up, I think they can increase that. Afterwards, prices will be negotiated down because it will just become so common to take Ozempic, I think. Because obesity is one of the main issues nowadays, and Ozempic cures it. So I think they will collapse to around 10%. I think they can increase their share buybacks by then. Because then the cash will be reliably coming in, they can invest in share buybacks. 17 multiple, it's a fantastic company, great pipeline. Of course, you will have to reevaluate in a few years how the pipeline will look. 35% payout ratio with a little deduction due to taxes. We come to $110, which is a 78% discount whereas today. And that is why I like the stock, I'm adding it to my portfolio. The only drug, I don't have drug manufacturer exposure, I have CVS as a healthcare company. I like the sector, I want to get more exposure to it. Now what if it goes even better? For the next 5 years, the pill basically continues to help them get the constant 25% growth. And let's say some of the new drugs go great. So even when prices are negotiated down, the growth rate still kind of keeps up. They get a lot of cash right now that they can invest in manufacturing, in research. 20 multiple on $193. Then we're back to the high prices. I don't think it will be like that, but that is an upside. They have a great pipeline. Now what if it goes kind of bad? Profits already start to collapse within the next 5 years. Drug prices get basically negotiated down very fast. After that, just normal growth for them, 10% with their new pipeline and the money they have. 12 multiple because it's not fastly growing anymore, 57. We still make around an 8.5% return there. So I don't dislike the scenario at all. That is why I'm adding. I think the risks are fairly low, and the current price, the upside is very high. I wouldn't have bought the stock back when it was at 110 because the risk is there. The risk is there at any point. It's a drug manufacturer stock. And for current price, great risk reward ratio. I'm adding. What do you think? Right down below. Have a good day.